travel back, past the Mughals, past the Guptas, past Ashoka, past the Buddha, past the Mahabharata itself, past everything you know as Indian history, until you reach a place so ancient that the rivers have different names. The Ravi, Parushni, the Bias, Vipasha, the Sutlej, Shatudri, the Chenab, Asikni, the Jhelum, Vitasta, the Indus, Sindhu, and the Saraswati, still flowing, still alive. 7 rivers, 1 land. Sapta Sindhu. This is where it begins. And what begins here will shape the name of this entire civilization. Before we tell you this war, you must understand how it survived. This story was never written down. The ancient rishis, the drashtas, the seers, did not compose these hymns. They received them. Veda means knowledge, not invented, not imagined, seen. The way a law of nature is discovered, not created. And what was received was held in the most powerful vessel ever built, the human mind. Syllable by syllable, breath by breath, teacher to student, generation to generation, unchanged. This is Shruti, that which is heard directly from the source. The Rig Veda, Rik, sacred verse, Veda, knowledge. 10 mandalas, 1,028 hymns, each one a window into a world that existed before memory became history. Veda Vyasa, the great compiler, gathered these rivers of received wisdom into the form that has reached us. But the knowledge itself belongs to the rishis of that ancient age, to men like Vasishta, whose words we are about to enter. This is not the India of palaces and emperors. This is something older, raw, more alive. The people of Sapta Sindhu lived in gramas, settlements bound by blood, cattle, and sacred fire. Many families made a vish. Many vish made a jana, a tribe. And at the head of each tribe, a rajan. Not an emperor, a warrior chief, called also Gopati, protector of the cows. Because in this world, cattle were not just food. They were wealth, status, power. To protect your cattle or take another's was the rhythm of this civilization. The Rajan did not rule alone. The Sabha, the council of elders. The Samiti, the assembly of the people. Voice mattered here. This was the architecture of Rig Vedic India, not built in stone, built in fire and blood, and the word of a chief that his people chose to follow. And above all else, fire, Agni. The Rig Veda opens with these exact words, the very first verse.
Agnimile purohitam yajnasya devam mritvijam, hotaram ratnadhatamam.
I glorify Agni, the high priest of the sacrifice, the divine, the ministrant who presents the oblation to the gods and is the possessor of great wealth. In this world, the sacred fire was the axis of everything, the living presence of the divine in the human world, the messenger between earth and the gods, the mouth that consumed every offering and carried it upward. Every morning, every evening, ghee was poured, grain was offered, the mantras were spoken, the gods were present. This was not religion as doctrine. This was dharma as breath. The Rig Veda speaks of 5 great peoples at the center of this world, the Pancha Jana, the Purus, the oldest, the most deeply rooted. The Saraswati was their river, Haryana and eastern Punjab their land. So central to the Rig Vedic world that the Vedic people were sometimes simply called the Purus. Every major Vedic tribe, including the one we follow into battle, was at its root a branch of this people. The Yadus, to the south and east. Their line would one day carry the name of Krishna,
But that is another age. The Turvashas, to the south and west, linked with the Yadus. The Anus, the northwestern tribe, their lands along the upper Parushni, pressing toward the mountains. Their gods different, their fires different, their prayers pointed in a different direction. And the Druhus, the most northwestern of all. A people the Rig Veda records as moving outward from the Sapta Sindhu, westward through the mountain passes, into the wider world. India has never been a land of invaders. India has always been the source, whose children carried their light outward. And the proof of that is only now coming fully to light.
Among all these peoples, one branch of the Puru had been growing differently, stronger, more directed, more singular. They were the Bharatas, specifically the Tritsu, the royal line within the Bharata tribe. The name Bharata in the Rig Veda is not the name of one king. It is the name of a people, a jana, a tribe that was, by origin, a branch of the great Puru. The Rig Veda confirms this directly. Both Devodasa and Sudas are referred to as Purus in different hymns. The Bharatas had not broken from the Purus. They had grown in a different direction. What set the Bharatas apart was their fire. The Rig Veda records Agni as bound to the Bharatas, carried by them, protected by them, burning in their sacrifices with uncommon intensity. Bharata, the one who carries, the one who bears. This was their identity, their mission. And the Tritsu warrior kings of this tribe had been building on that identity for generations. The Bharata Trutsu line had produced great warriors, but it is with Divodasa that the Bharata story truly begins to roar. Divodasa, Divo of the sky, Dasa, servant, servant of heaven, and Indra's chosen. His greatest achievement is in Mandala 6 of the Rig Veda. His enemy, the Dasyu king Shambhara, a ruler who held 99 fortresses, mountain strongholds cut into the peaks and passes of the northwest. Stone, ancient, thought to be impregnable. Divodasa invoked Indra, Purandara, the fortress breaker, the thunderer who demolishes the walls of the enemy. And Indra answered. 99 fortresses fell. The Dasyu king defeated. His strongholds rubble. Divodasa established the Bharata Trutsu tribe as the dominant power of the Saraswati basin. The river the Rig Veda calls Ambitame, greatest of mothers, Naditame, greatest of rivers, Devitame, greatest of goddesses. This was the land Divodasa secured. This was the inheritance he left his line. King Sudas, son of Divodasa, came from warriors who had pushed the Bharata tribe further with each generation, made it stronger, brought more of Sapta Sindhu under the Vedic fire. Sudas inherited all of it: the sacred Saraswati territory, the cattle, the trained warriors, the chariots, fast, copper-armed, lethal, the Vashista priestly lineage, the most faithful allies of his family, and the divine favor, still warm from his ancestors' victories. On the battlefield, Sudas was a Rig Vedic war king, lean and sun-hardened, Anis that read the terrain the way a priest reads the fire, wrapped warrior's garments, leather across the chest, copper at the wrist, gold at the neck, a king's mark. Mounted on a 2-horse chariot, the most powerful military weapon of his age, he rode into every campaign knowing exactly what he carried on his shoulders: the name of the Bharatas, the fire of the Tritsu, the memory of Divodasa. This was the man the 10 kings would gather against. But before the war, he needed a priest, and the priest he chose would change everything.
Every great king needs a great priest. In the Vedic world, the relationship between the Rajan and his Purohita, his royal priest, was not ceremonial. It was the axis on which everything turned. The priest invoked the gods before every campaign. He prepared the sacred fire. He recited the mantras that called Indra to the battlefield. He knew, with the precision of a seer, exactly which hymn, which offering, which sacred act would move the unseen forces in the king's favor. A king without the right priest was a warrior without the ground beneath his feet. When Sudas set his sights westward, Pushing the Bharata reach across the rivers of Punjab, the priest beside him was Vishwamitra, of the Kushika lineage, son of Gathina, the rishi through whom the most sacred mantra in all of Vedic tradition was received, the Gayatri mantra. We focus our minds on the divine that pervades the physical, mental, and spiritual realms. We worship the divine radiance of Savitur, the sun, the supreme source of all illumination. We meditate upon that sacred, purifying light of the divine. May that divine light awaken and guide our intellects toward truth, wisdom, and goodness. This was the prayer Vishwamitra brought to every campaign. Not a prayer for destruction, a prayer for illumination, for the mind to be guided rightly.
And what happened next, the Rig Veda records directly. In Mandala 3, hymn 33, Sudas and Vishwamitra reach the banks of the Vipasha, the river we call today the Bias. Wide, auspicious, sacred. The Rig Veda describes this river as flowing like parent cows hastening to caress the calf. The two rivers, Vipasha and Shutudri, joining together with that particular tenderness that only great rivers possess. Vishwamitra stood at the bank. He invoked the rivers. He asked them to make way. He told them a great king was crossing, that the Bharatas were moving, that Indra had sanctioned this passage. And the Rig Veda records, the rivers yielded, moving from Haryana into the heart of Punjab. Then, in Mandala 7, the battle hymns, Sudas has reached the Parushni, the modern Ravi. His enemies, the coalition of 10, are described in the hymns as the people of the Asikni, the Chenab, the river just west of the Parushni. They are coming from the west. He is standing on the east bank of the Parushni. The river, the sacred, fierce Parushni, stands between them.
And then, something changed. The ancient commentary of Sayana on the Rig Veda, Mandala 3, hymn 53, confirms the enmity between the Vishwamitra lineage and the Vashishta lineage arose in connection with the king, Sudas. What exactly happened? The Rig Veda does not give us in full detail. What we know, clearly from the hymns themselves, is that by the time the Dasharajna battle is fought, Sudas's priest is Vashishta. At the moment the greatest battle of this age begins, it is Vashishta who stands beside Sudas. It is Vashishta who lifts his hands to the fire. It is Vashishta who calls upon Indra and Varuna and the Maruts.
Before this war begins, there is one more thing that must be understood. A word that has been twisted, misused, and weaponized by those who wanted to claim it for themselves and deny it to others. That word is Aryan. In the Rig Veda, Arya has a precise, clear meaning. It means noble, honorable, of high conduct. It was not a racial category. It was not an ethnic group. It was not a nation. It was a description of character, a standard of behavior. To be Arya was to live with Dharma, to honor the sacred fire, to speak truth, to protect the weak. The Rig Veda uses the word Arya to refer to the people of the Vedic world, the people who lived by these values. And Aryavarta, the land of the Arya, was this land, Bharatavarsha, the land between the Himalayas and the sea, the so-called Aryan invasion theory. The idea that these people came from outside and invaded India has been proven false.
The people of the Rig Veda were not invaders. They were the original inhabitants of this land. The genetic research, the archaeological record, the river geography of the Rig Veda itself, all of it points in one direction. The movement was outward from India, not inward. What became Persia, Iran? The word itself is the ancient form of Arya. The Persians are the descendants of the people who left this land, who carried the word Arya with them. The word Arya, the word Iran, the word Aryavarta, they all come from the same root, from this soil,
from these rivers, from these people. On the eve of war, Vashishta built the fire to its greatest height. He poured the soma, the sacred drink pressed from the holy plant, mixed with milk and water, into the fire and into the ritual cups. He called upon Indra. Indra, the Vedic force of thunder, of storm, of celestial waters. Called Vritrahan, the slayer of Vritra, the great obstructor. Called Purandara, the destroyer of fortresses. Called Shakra, the powerful one. Called Vajrapani, the wielder of the Vajra, the divine weapon of lightning and thunder. When Vashishta prayed to Indra, he was not asking for a favor. He was performing a precise sacred act, aligning the forces of the cosmos with the cause of Sudas. The prayer worked. The gods came. And what happened at the Parushni was the answer.
The coalition had assembled 10 kings, more than 10 tribes, a combined force the likes of which the Sapta Sindhu had never seen, gathered in one place for one purpose. They stood on the western bank of the Parushni, the river we call today the Ravi, wide, powerful, running fast from the mountains. In this age, fed by the snowmelt of the Himalayas and the seasonal rains that turned the Punjab plain green, the Parushni was not simply a river. It was a wall, and the coalition's commanders understood this. They attempted to part the river, to divert it, to redirect its flow. This was an ancient military tactic, the deliberate diversion of a river's channel, using earth, timber, and stone, to change where the water flowed, to cut off the enemy's access, to create flooding on the eastern bank where Sudas and the Bharata stood. It was, by any measure, a brilliant strategic plan. The Parushni, however, had other intentions. On the eastern bank, Vashishta watched the coalition's river work, and he turned back to his fire. He had been praying since the night before. He would pray now with everything he had. When the coalition tried to block the Parushni, they were, in the language of the Rig Veda, enacting the role of Vritra, the obstructor, the one who holds the waters back. And Vashishta called upon Vritrahan. Then the river turned. The Lord of the heavens, Indra, repressed the coalition. The waters they had diverted, the channel they had worked through the night to redirect, turned against them. The swift among them, the fastest warriors, could not return from it. The Parushni took them. Men who had stood at that bank all night, working the earth and timber in the dark, were caught in the very flood they had tried to create. The coalition's position on the western bank, devastated. Their plan, their brilliant strategic plan, had become their destruction. On the eastern bank, Sudas did not wait. The Rig Veda, verse 5 of hymn 7.18, tells us Indra made the deep waters of the Parushni fordable for Sudas. The moment the western bank collapsed into chaos, Sudas moved. He did not hesitate. He crossed in the storm, in the chaos. The same river that had just destroyed the coalition's plan now described the Bharata army's advance. Water and warriors, both unstoppable, both moving in the same direction. What followed on the banks of the Parushni was not one clean engagement. The weapons of this age, copper-tipped arrows, the primary weapon, fired from the chariot. The bow, danush, strung tight, range and precision the key advantage. Spears, thrown from distance, thrust in close. Axes and clubs for when the lines collapsed into each other. And the chariot itself, the ultimate weapon. 2 horses, a driver, a warrior, moving at speed through the enemy's lines, releasing arrows, throwing spears, then turning and doing it again. In this age, the chariot was what changed battles. Indra, at once with conquering might, demolished all their strong places and their 7 castles. The wealth of the Anu tribe redistributed to the Tertsus. Kavasha, the Rig Veda calls him famed and ancient, drowned in the river he had tried to weaponize. The Druhu, overwhelmed and driven back, further from the Sapta Sindhu than they had ever been. Their fate at the Parushni was the beginning of a long migration that would take them generation by generation further and further from this land.
Verse 14 of hymn 7.18 gives us a number, recorded not as a definitive count, but as a poetic rendering of the scale of what fell. The warriors of the Anus and Druhus, intending to carry off the cattle, hostile to the pious Sudas, perished to the number of
6,666.
Such are all the glorious acts of Indra. Vashista did not call them enemies, he called them heroes. Veera, men of courage, who came for what warriors come for, and fell where warriors fall. This is the dignity of the Rig Veda. Even in recording victory, it honors the fallen on both sides.
But the Dasarajna did not end at the Purushni. Hymn 7.83, verse 4, confirmed directly from the Rig Veda, gives us a king named Beda. Indra and Varuna, the Rig Veda says, protected Sudas by overwhelming Beda. Hymn 7.18, verse 19, the dwellers on the Yamuna and the Tritsus glorified Indra when he killed Beda in battle. The Yamuna, the river on Sudas's eastern flank, and the Tritsus fighting there too. This tells us the reach of the Dasarajna extended across the geography of the entire Punjab, from the Purushni in the west to the Yamuna in the east. Verse 19 continues, the Ajas, the Shigrus, the Yakshas offered him as a sacrifice the heads of the horses killed in the combat. 3 more tribes, not part of the main 10, who now came forward. Not to fight, to submit. The heads of horses, the most ancient symbol of submission in this world. To give the head of your most prized animal was to say, we acknowledge your supremacy. The night after the final engagement, Vashista, witness to the greatest battle of his age, recorded what he had been given. 200 cows, 2 chariots with mares, 4 pearl-adorned horses, brown steeds, firmly stepping. In the sacred tradition of Dana Stuti, the hymn of gratitude for the patron's gift, every great priest recorded what the king gave. It was an act of acknowledgement of the bond between Rajan and Purohita, made permanent in the sacred language of the Veda. The final verse of hymn 7.18, the last line in the great battle hymn, is not a victory shout. It is a prayer. Verse 25, Maruts, leaders of rites, attend upon this prince as you did upon Divodasa, the father of Sudas. Favor the prayers of the devout son of Pijavana, and may his strength be unimpaired, undecaying. This is the prayer of a man who understands that victory is not the end. It is a beginning, fragile, precious, requiring the same devotion that brought it into existence. The Rig Veda ends its account of the Dasarajna with this prayer, not with triumph, with hope.
After the Dasarajna, the Bharata tribe's cultural and spiritual dominance extended across the Saptasindhu and beyond. The texts of the Indian tradition, confirmed across the Puranas and the Mahabharata, tell us that the name Bharatavarsha, the land of Bharata, is the name of this entire civilization. Not a state, not an empire, a Varsha, a domain, a realm of civilization. The realm where Vedic Dharma flourished, where the sacred fire was kept, where the rivers were honored as goddesses, where the hymns were received and preserved. The term Bharata Santati, the unified people who inherited this land, speaks to something deeper, that what the Bharata tribe built after the Dasarajna was not just military dominance, it was cultural unity, a shared inheritance, a civilization that would call itself for thousands of years to come by the name of this tribe and this fire, India, Bharat. The same name, the same root, still here, still alive. The oldest continuous civilization on Earth.
Now, the thread that connects the Dasarajna to the most famous war India has ever known. After the Purushni, the defeated Puru tribe did not disappear. The Puranas, the great chronicles of Indian tradition, tell us through the Vishnu Purana and the Mahabharata that the Bharatas and the Purus, who had stood on opposite banks of the Purushni, were always of the same root, both branches of the lunar lineage, both children of the same ancient ancestry. And across the slow turning of generations, as the Rig Vedic age gave way to the later Vedic age, these two branches drew back toward each other. The Vishnu Purana and the Mahabharata record, from the line of Puru came a king named Samvarana.
Samvarana had a son. He named him Kuru. And Kuru, the Mahabharata tells us, practiced austerities in a great field between the Saraswati and the Drishadvati rivers. That field was named after him, Kurukshetra, the same field where thousands of years later his descendants would gather for the greatest war the world had ever seen. From Kuru came the Kuru dynasty, confirmed across the Vishnu Purana, the Matsya Purana, and the Mahabharata itself. The Kurus built their capital on the banks of the Ganga, a city named Hastinapura, founded by a king named Hasti. From Hastinapura, the Kuru lineage grew, splitting over generations into two branches, the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And those two branches met on the field of Kurukshetra for the war that Vyasa recorded in 100,000 verses, the Mahabharata. The thread runs clean and unbroken, from the Purushni to Kurukshetra, from Sudas to Arjuna, from Vashista to Vyasa, from the oldest hymn to the greatest epic.
But the story of the Dasarajna did not only flow eastward, toward the Ganga and Kurukshetra, it also flowed westward. The Druhyus, pushed further from the Sapta Sindhu than they had ever been, continued moving through the mountain passes of the northwest, into what is today Afghanistan, into the Iranian plateau, further. And they were not alone. The Anus, the northwestern tribe, whose defeat at the Purushni had broken their position, also moved westward over time. These were not the last people to leave. They were among the first of many migrations that flowed outward from this ancient heartland, carrying language, culture, the memory of the sacred fire, into a world that did not yet have these things. This is the out of India reality, not a theory, a growing body of evidence, linguistic, genetic, archaeological, that points in one consistent direction. The movement was from India, not into it. The Vedic Sanskrit that Vashista spoke at the Purushni is the ancestor of the languages spoken today across half the world: Persian, Greek, Latin, Russian, German, French, English, all of them cousins of Sanskrit, all of them carrying within their roots the fingerprints of the language spoken on the banks of the Saraswati.
For those who need more than ancient texts, science has begun to speak, and what it is saying is extraordinary. There is a marker in the human Y chromosome, passed from father to son, unchanged across thousands of generations, called haplogroup R1A1. It is one of the most widely distributed genetic markers in the world, found in high frequencies across India, Central Asia, Iran, Eastern Europe, Russia, Scandinavia. For decades, the dominant theory was that R1A1 originated somewhere in Central Asia or the Eurasian steppe and spread into India. But a landmark study published in the Journal of Human Genetics in 2009 by Sharma et al. Analyzed 2,809 Y chromosomes from across India. Their finding? Extended phylogenetic analyses of the pooled dataset supported the autochthonous origin of R1A1 lineage in India, and a tribal link to Indian Brahmins, autochthonous, originating here in India. The highest diversity of R1A1 ancestral lineages, the oldest branches of the family tree, are found in India, not in Central Asia, not in the Eurasian steppe, in India. The genetic trail does not lead into India, it leads out of it. The men who prayed at the Purushni, who fought under Sudas, who migrated westward after the Dasarajna, carried this marker with them, and wherever they went, it stayed. In the Brahmin of Varanasi, in the Jat of Punjab, in the Iranian of Tehran, in the Slavic man of Poland, in the Scandinavian of Oslo, all of them carrying, in the deepest code of their biology, the memory of the Sapta Sindhu.
And then there is this, perhaps the most remarkable piece of evidence in this entire story: Australia. The continent thought to have been completely isolated from the rest of the world for 45,000 years, until the Europeans arrived in the 1700s. Except it wasn't. A landmark genetic study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2013 by Irina Pugash and colleagues analyzed the full genomes of Aboriginal Australians, New Guineans, Southeast Asians, and Indians. Their finding? Substantial gene flow from India to Australia, approximately 4,230 years ago.
Some Aboriginal Australians from the Northern Territory carry up to 11% of their genome from Indian migrants who arrived by boat across the Indian Ocean, bringing with them new stone tool technologies, new methods of processing plants, and the dingo. The dingo, Australia's wild dog, has its origin in India, and it arrived in Australia at exactly the same time as this genetic signal.
The India-Australia connection is not alone. The genetic, linguistic, and archaeological evidence of ancient Indian migration points across the entire ancient world. The Mitanni kingdom of ancient Mesopotamia, modern Syria and northern Iraq, whose ruling elite used Sanskrit names for their kings, invoked Vedic gods, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Nasatya, in their treaties, and used Sanskrit technical terms for chariot racing. The Bogazkoy inscription of 1400 BCE, found in Asia Minor, modern Turkey, which records the names of Vedic deities in a diplomatic treaty. The ancient Greek pantheon, whose Zeus shares his root with the Vedic Dyaus, the sky father. Dyaus, Zeus, Jupiter, the same divine name in 3 different languages, carried by people who began in the same place. The Celtic traditions of Ireland and Scotland, whose myths carry structural parallels to the Vedic hymns. The sacred fire traditions of the ancient Persians, who called their priests Afravan, a word cognate with the Sanskrit Afarvan, the ancient Vedic fire priest. Everywhere you look in the ancient world, you find the fingerprints of this civilization. Not because India conquered the world. India has never conquered the world. Because India was the world, before the world spread out and forgot where it came from. We come back now to the river, the Purushni, the modern Ravi, still flowing through Punjab today, carrying the snow melt of the Himalayas toward the plains that this story was fought across. It does not know what happened on its banks. Rivers do not remember. They just flow. But we do, because a sage, thousands of years ago, in the aftermath of the greatest battle of his age, sat by a fire and composed 25 verses that preserved this entire world in the amber of sacred language. Vashista did not know his hymn would survive. He did not know it would outlast every empire, every dynasty, every city that would ever be built on the land he was looking at. He just composed, because that is what a seer does. He sees and he speaks what he sees. And he trusts that the universe will carry it forward. And the universe did. The Rig Veda. UNESCO declared the tradition of its recitation intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2008, not as a museum piece, not as a relic, but as a living tradition, still recited, still memorized, still passed from teacher to student, without a single letter changed. The oldest living text in human history, still breathing, still here. Rig Veda, Saptama Mandala, Sukta Ashtadasha, the hymn that remembers the war that made Bharat. This land has been called many things by many people in many ages, but there is one name that has never changed. Bharata, not a political name, not a modern construction, the name of a people who carried the sacred fire, who crossed the rivers of Punjab, who stood at the Purushni, and who built, from that moment, the longest continuous civilization in human history.